I'm on my fourth beer, by the way, so I'm having a great time.
Uh, that's
Well, it's my intention before the end of this to be completely blotto, right? So if I just stop responding at some point, just shut off Zoom and just assume that I'm sleeping, right? So, welcome back to Gibbs It To Me Straight. This is episode 5 of Gibbs It To Me Straight. My partner, Robby Thesword, and I'm Ashley J. Williams. We are doing a rewatch of NCIS. Our last episode was episode 4, which I can't recall the name of that episode. Robby, can you help me out there?
that was episode 4 was The Immortals. I almost said the name of episode 3.
The Immortals, yeah.
Episode 4 was The Immortals.
Which was an astoundingly stupid episode, astoundingly weird episode is what it was. It was some
Yes.
combination of stupid and weird. Before we dive into this, we have some surprises for our listener. I think we're just a solo listener, but I wanted to ask: have we had any social media activity? Have we had any hate mail, or how are we doing? What's our download count, or how are we doing as a podcast?
So, in terms of pure download count, I can say we are in the 50s.
50? You're
We're in the
kidding me.
50s. No, not at all.
Wait. So is that for episode 4 or just overall?
That's every episode. Every episode we have 50 downloads.
Okay, that's good. That's good.
I can tell you per episode. You see, for episode 4, we've got 9 downloads on that so far. Oddly enough, our most downloaded was episode 3. I think that's because we initially debuted on YouTube with the first 2 episodes, and then got the first 2 put out on the podcast catchers and stuff a little bit later. But yeah, we're sitting at 55.
Well, I don't know how to measure these things. I don't think that we rank according to Joe Rogan, for example. I think he has millions of views. However, I'm sure there's some obscure podcasts out there that have far less than 50 downloads.
All of the other podcasts that I haven't started,
Yeah,
for instance.
yeah, that's right. The ones that are currently kind of gelling in your mind. That's right.
Absolutely. The hate mail that we've received so far has only been from ourselves.
From ourselves, yeah, right. We had a brief discussion about our what that says about our self-loathing.
Yes.
After our last recording session, I did send us additional hate mail, and also I left some derogatory comments on our YouTube channel. That was me
I
doing that.
remember
Yeah,
seeing those.
yeah.
I
I
remember seeing
declared that
those.
we are criminally insane, which I don't know about you, but I am. So okay,
No,
and have we moved out into new social media spaces? Or are we still gelling in Blue Sky and YouTube?
we're still moving along at a pretty good clip on Blue Sky. I just checked and we got another follower.
Hmm.
So thank you to Fibberty Gibbet. Is
Flipperty
that what they
Gibbet.
were
That's
called?
from, yeah,
It,
Flipperty
it was
Gibbet.
it was some variation on Flibbity Gibbet,
Yeah.
which as a phrase I really, really love.
Okay, so we're gonna try something a little bit different to this recording session.
Yeah, we've got a sort of another surprise for our listeners, as you'll probably have noticed from either the art for this episode and maybe from the titling structure. We're not exactly following formula.
So we've had a previous discussion about kind of shaking things up a little bit, and we're going to cover episode 1 of a show that I got into, not similarly in the way that you got into NCIS, because I feel
Hmm.
like NCIS for you was just sort of background noise that you sort of paid attention to.
100%.
Yeah, so I had gotten into a TV show called Stargate SG1 back in the 2000s because I'm a science fiction nerd, and it was on the TV, and so I watched it. And it was quite a phenomenon for what it was. At its height, it had 3 different shows. It spun off into 2 other shows. And it
I
had
did not know that.
Yeah, it had millions of viewers. There was a time there when it rivaled the Star Trek franchise. in terms of
That
popularity.
is, and I mean, you said this was early 2000s, so that was whenever, gosh, what is the one with Bakula?
Oh, Quantum Leap.
Is it what?
Or no, you're thinking of Star Trek Enterprise.
Yes. Is that around the same time as whenever some of Enterprise was
I
happening?
would have to check, but I think it roughly tracks Stargate SG1. I think its first episode aired in 1997. It ran for 10 seasons, which is,
What?
yeah, so it ran for 10 seasons. Now, understanding that NCIS ran, I think you said, for 17 seasons, perhaps,
It's
and
still going.
yeah, it's still
It's in the
going, right?
20s now.
That's highly unusual. Usually, and I don't have any academic evidence for this, but just I've noticed that in the States they kind of do things different in England, right? They have different series, right?
Hmm.
But in the States, if you have a series that can pull out 7 seasons, then you are wildly successful, right?
Hmm.
Uh, that tends to be kind of the norm. Stargate SG1, and we'll get a little bit into kind of the history of the show and how it came to be. It ran for 10 seasons. It had a spinoff that was called Stargate Atlantis, and
Uh,
you've heard
mhm.
of it?
I've heard of it.
Yeah, and it also had another spinoff called Stargate Universe. And once you get into these shows and then you become a fan and you kind of read the history, Stargate SG1, they thought that it was going to end after season 7. And so they filmed a series or show finale in season 7, and then they inexplicably got renewed, I guess, because of the popularity. And so they had to retcon a couple of things and bring the show back for season 8. They mix things up in terms of its cast. And then I think each year after season 7 they believed they were going to be canceled, so I think they tried
Wow.
to film things in such a way that you could have a satisfying conclusion at the end of each season. Eventually at season 10 they had to stop because with each new season the primary cast was receiving raises in terms of their salary, and eventually they could no longer
Right.
afford to film it. It was a science fiction, it was a special effects heavy show, which was expensive already, and when the cast had 10 years of raises, they just couldn't afford to film it anymore. But yeah, let's just get a little bit into the background of the show and how it came to be. So
Yeah.
it is a continuation of a film that was released in 1994 called Stargate, simply Stargate. And that was a film that was directed and co-written by Roland Emmerich, also of Independence Day.
I had no idea this was a Roland Emmerich thing.
Yeah. Yeah, the movie was, right? Later on, and we'll get into this a little bit later
Uh-huh.
on, the TV show parted ways with Roland, and there was a new creative team.
Okay.
But the film Stargate in 1994, it was a Roland Emmerich vehicle. It was in collaboration with a screenwriter named Dean Devlin, and it was mildly popular. It did well enough that there was some interest in rebooting it, or not rebooting it, but continuing it as a regular TV show.
Okay.
And so we talked about this a little bit earlier. There's a bit of world building that's going to go on here, which is a little bit different from NCIS. So I found this to be a
Right.
challenge in terms of preparing for this. So I found this on Pluto TV, which is
Oh, great.
a free broadcast network. And so I've been watching the first episode, the pilot episode of Stargate SG1, which is distinct from the movie Stargate, although they have connections. And the pilot episode of Stargate SG1 was a two-parter, and so we're going to cover half of that today. And it initially aired on Showtime. And
Right.
I think the way that they had intended it, or the suits over at Showtime had intended it, was it to be, I think they wanted it to be some form of premiere television, kind of like The Sopranos, but in a science fiction context. And so you see some discrepancies between what was aired on Showtime and what was aired on free TV, broadcast television. The Showtime version of it had nudity and profanity, but when you find it online now, like at Pluto, it's a little bit sanitized. But
Oh, the serialized version is like the network cut.
well, there's an interesting history there. Showtime aired it for a certain number of seasons. I forget how many, and then they canceled it. But then it was picked up, I believe, by the Sci-Fi Network.
That sounds about right.
Yeah, and then it aired on the Sci-Fi Network for a long time. And I'm not sure if it got picked up by by another broadcaster, but it kind of sort of hopped homes a little bit. So this breakdown was a little bit difficult to sort out because there's a bit of world building that occurs in the first episode, but it builds on the world building from the film. So I thought what I would do is just briefly walk you through the plot of the film, and then that would segue into the TV show. And then after we do that, I have a couple of surprises. But before we proceed, do you have any questions or comments or random insults?
Let's see. Question being, since we've talked about this a decent amount, that I'm wondering, like, have you watched? I assume you've watched the whole or like the majority of the show.
Yeah. So throughout the late 90s and early 2000s and even into the 2010s, because it was a very long-lived show, right? Like it ended at season 10, but Stargate Atlantis, I think, had 5 seasons and Stargate Universe had 3 seasons. So you're looking at, a solid like 13, 14 years, 15 years of airtime. I picked it up at a time when these shows were not freely available, right? I didn't have cable, so I was pirating it, to be bluntly honest, from Usenet. And so I caught as many episodes as I could just because I was interested in science fiction. But a couple of years ago, during COVID, actually, I decided to do a complete rewatch of all 10 seasons of the show, of Stargate SG1.
Oh, man.
And it was quite a journey because it begins with a set of actors and it ends with a similar set of actors, but they've added a couple of new faces. So I have watched every episode of this show. However, I have not watched them multiple times as you have with NCIS.
All right. Okay.
But the plot of Stargate, the film, again, it was released in 1994. It focuses on an Egyptologist, and his name is Dr. Daniel Jackson. And the conceit of the film is that there's an Egyptologist, Dr. Daniel Jackson, that believes that ancient aliens, right? So ancient aliens have visited Earth, and there's a connection between Egyptian culture, ancient Egyptian culture, and ancient Egyptian mythology, and these ancient aliens. And Daniel Jackson, who's a brilliant scientist, he's an archaeologist and a scientist, his views have been marginalized. He's seen as a crackpot.
I know so little about any of this franchise. So going into this TV show where it's like, and I think whenever we originally talked about this, one of the only things I knew was that's the one that's got Christopher Judge in it.
Yes.
And has like, and is somewhat, at least in pieces, it seems like it's filmed like a documentary or a mockumentary or something. But then it's like, oh, and well, I think I only saw that because there was like a B-side where people talk directly to camera. So I could be wrong about that.
Well, it does have Christopher Judge in it, yes, but it's not filmed as a documentary.
Okay. But then going back to Roland Emmerich and being like, oh man, okay, that's interesting. I didn't realize that. I'm kind of shocked that this is like a thing he did around the same time as Independence Day that franchised out more successfully. And then it starts off with the same nonsense that Roland Emmerich does often, which is like, let's just dive deep into this random stupid thing.
Yeah, well, I'm glad you put it that way, because as much affection that I have for this show, it's really dumb. Right? It's a big dumb show. It's dumb in different ways than NCIS. NCIS, I think, is dumb, at least to me, in ways that are offensive. Right? Stargate SG1 is dumb in ways that are comic bookish. That's probably the best way to describe this. It's a visual comic book.
And that is a level of dumb that I can get along with.
Oh, yeah. Well, you may very well find that after this couple of recording sessions, because the pilot episode of Stargate SG1 actually is broken up into 2 episodes, so it's more than we can record in one session. But you may find an interest in it. It's just big, dumb fun. Like the good and bad is clearly defined. There's the bad guys are the bad guys, and they're just irredeemable. The good guys are always making sacrifices, and they're virtuous. And it's just very simple watching.
I'm excited. I'm good to go.
So here's what happens in the film. So I'm going to have to kind of set the stage here with the film. Dr. Daniel Jackson has this belief that ancient aliens visited Earth in the Egyptian the Egyptian era was so long, like it spanned thousands and thousands of years. But in ancient Egypt, these aliens visited Earth, and he felt like he had proof, and he'd been marginalized as a crackpot. But separate to that, the U.S. military discovers an artifact in ancient Egypt that they can't understand. It's a giant ring, essentially about 20 feet in diameter. They believe that it has advanced technology, and they reach out to Daniel Jackson and they ask him for assistance in determining what the ring is for. So the artifact itself is massive. It's a circular device. Again, it's about 20 feet in diameter, and the military itself calls it a Stargate once the actual use of it is determined.
Okay.
It's made of an unknown alien metal, and it's covered with symbols that resemble Egyptian hieroglyphs, which is why they call him Daniel Jackson, because he's made a name for himself, he's made an infamous name for himself by being a proponent of an ancient alien theory. Jackson realizes that the symbols that are adorned across the circle itself are actually coordinates in space. And he realizes that if the Stargate itself, the circular artifact, if the symbols on it are rotated in a specific combination, they correspond to a coordinate in space, and you can actually go there because the ring itself is a stable wormhole.
Okay.
So the Stargate itself functions as a wormhole generator, and when it's activated with a precise sequence of symbols that resolve to a point in space, it's a dialing address, essentially. It creates a stable portal between these two distant points, one of them on Earth, and then this distant location. So are we on solid ground here?
Yeah. I mean, that is. I know I'll figure this out through context, but how quickly in the movie do they go from like this man is seen as crazy because of ancient aliens theory, military finds thing that very clearly proves man isn't crazy. We can travel we can travel through space because of this now.
Well,
Is this like the first half hour?
Yeah, it's a good question, and I went back as a part of due diligence when I did my rewatch to watch the film itself. It's been a few years though, right? So my memory of the pacing of the film is a little bit rusty, but I can tell you that when Daniel Jackson describes how the symbols on the Stargate itself can be associated with a point of like a three-dimensional point in space. It's a satisfying conclusion.
That's cool.
Yeah, so it sort of makes sense.
And that does remind me of like sci-fi that I really enjoy. Like that, the idea of those kinds of technologies or those kind of discoveries being made.
And I did find the film to be satisfying in the sense of a science fiction perspective. I found it to be dissatisfying, though, from the perspective of how the military would treat this. Right, because I think that so the plot of the film is that using Daniel Jackson as a consultant, the U.S. Air Force itself, and I've never been quite clear on why the Air Force was the branch of the military that got this. I guess because air and space, but they decide to send a team of highly trained military special operators through the Stargate to investigate what's on the other side, and they bring Daniel Jackson along as a consultant, right? I don't think it would have worked out that way if the military in real life, right? In my own experience with the military, they probably just crate it up and send it to that same warehouse that you see at the end of Raiders of the Lost Ark, right? They would just be considered to be too dangerous, right? They would just send it off into obscurity. But in the film, they assemble a team of special operators from the Air Force, and it's led by a character named Colonel Jack O'Neill. And so he's in charge of this team that consists of, I don't know, like 8 or 10 or 12 or so special operators. And they go through the Stargate with Daniel Jackson. And their orders are, his orders are to go through the Stargate with his team, investigate what's on the other side. And if there are perceived threats to humanity, This, I think, actually
Okay.
is accurate to the military. They've given him an atomic bomb. And so his orders are, this part is accurate in terms of the United States military, where he's basically given a nuke, and his orders are go to the other side, do what you can to, engage in scientific discovery, but if you feel threatened, blow it all up.
Oh,
Right? Just nuke it.
my
Right?
God. Alrighty then.
So that he and his team, they go through the Stargate with Daniel Jackson, and they arrive on a desert planet that resembles what you would conceive of ancient Egypt, right?
Okay.
And they find a bunch of humans on the other side. They encounter a civilization of other humans that have been enslaved by a powerful alien who uses his advanced technology to pose or pretend like he's a god. And specifically, he patterns himself after the Egyptian god Ra, the Egyptian sun god Ra. So the conceit of the film is that an alien has advanced technology to the extent that they can pretend like they're a god, and they've enslaved humans on this desert planet. And the desert planet is called Abydos, which was actually a real city in ancient Egypt. So there are several connections between, like, the writers did their research, or to the extent that the Hollywood writers do their research. They did their research in terms of Egyptian mythology, and so they try to make these connections. Ra was actually a sun god in Egyptian mythology. So those that was a real mythologic character. And so Daniel Jackson O'Neill lead a rebellion to free the planet's people from this alien despot Ra. And they're also worried because now that they've come to the gate, Ra is aware that there's this fertile there's this fertile planet in the form of Earth where he can exert his dominion, right? So there's an existential threat to Earth now that Ra realizes that humans on planet Earth have kind of flourished, and there's billions of humans, right? So eventually what happens is that the military team gets the nuclear device that they brought over. They sneak it onto Ra's spaceship, because in addition to these Stargate portals, these wormholes, this alien race, they also have access to spacecraft technology, right?
Well,
yeah,
of course.
So they kind of get this nuclear device onto Ra's spaceship, and then they blow it up, right? So they nuke Ra, and nuclear weapons are probably the most powerful man-made destructive force imaginable. So you can understand why the Hollywood writers would use that device to eliminate the threat. And so the U.S. Air Force team is under Jack O'Neill, Kurt Russell. They're victorious, and now they have been given an order to detonate this device, the nuclear device, on the other side, not necessarily on the spacecraft, but just to blow up the other end of the Stargate, right? To kind of protect Earth from anyone from the other gate coming back to Earth. They didn't do that. Right. So they didn't do that. So they actually took the nuclear device onto the spacecraft that Ra was on and blew it up there, killing Ra. But they didn't want to come back to the Department of Defense and tell them about this kind of deviation from the plan, because if they had detonated the nuclear device on the other side, they would have killed all these enslaved humans.
Right.
So instead, they blow up the device on Ra's spacecraft. Daniel Jackson elects to stay behind on Abydos because for an Egyptian archaeologist, this is the opportunity of a lifetime.
Right. He's freaking out. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
because like the Egyptian culture has flourished untouched in this other place. And so he gets to study Egyptian culture, Egyptian mythology as a living thing, as opposed to on Earth where we don't even know what the ancient Egyptian language sounded like. Right. So he stays behind, but Jack O'Neill and the Air Force guys, they can't reveal this to the U.S. military, because the U.S. military would say, we'll go back with another bomb. Right. We insist that they all be blown up. So they come back to Earth without Daniel Jackson, who, by the way, finds a love interest on Abydos. So he's got a double reason to want to stay on Abydos. There's the academic interest and his passion, but also he finds a love interest. The military team return to Earth, and they tell the Pentagon that, yeah, we blew up the nuclear device, right? And they're not lying. They did blow it up, but they didn't blow it up in the manner that the Pentagon wanted. And so there's a happy ending in that Daniel Jackson stays behind, and then the Kurt Russell character, Jack O'Neill, continues his career, and everyone's happy, except for Ra, who's dead.
Well, yeah. So did that mean, so since they had the nuke to blow up the other Stargate, does that mean that there has to be multiple, like that, so that setting up and like dialing in the Stargate, that doesn't result in a new one? Just does that result in a new wormhole just existing?
We're going to discuss that, and you're very astute. I have either relayed this plot in very accurate terms such that it spurred your interest, or you're a genius, right? Because what you just suggested, the possibility of multiple addresses and multiple Stargates, becomes a pivotal plot point in the show itself.
Okay.
So very good. So that's either either means that I'm a very good storyteller, or that you're just a very good listener. One of the two.
We'll have to find out.
Well, we're going to find out. So that is the film Stargate. Again, it was released in 1994. The TV show Stargate SG1 picks up where it left off. And the first episode of Stargate SG1, which is called Children of the Gods, so you can kind of see the gods connection between Ra and so forth. So that aired on Showtime in 1997. And the creative force behind the TV show, Brad Wright and Jonathan Glassner, and so they were given the task renewing this universe that was introduced in Stargate, but to do it in such a way that would be appropriate for television.
Okay.
I'm on my fourth beer, by the way, so I'm having a great time.
That's
Well, it's my intention before the end of this to be completely blotto, right? So if I just stop responding at some point, just shut off Zoom and just assume that I'm sleeping, right? So now we're ready to actually move into the TV show itself. But before we do that, do you have any questions or comments or observations about what we covered so far?
It started off kind of where I was expecting, but it is veering off into interesting territory.
Yeah, I think that's one of the challenges with the show. It's really easy to hate the show because it's big and dumb and stupid. And in the same way that NCIS is propaganda, this is total military propaganda, right? Like the Air Force is going to be a big part of this, right? But there's just something endearing about this show. Assuming we get further into other episodes, if this is not just a one-off diversion, I think you'll find that this is a show that you can forgive for being stupid. I don't forgive NCIS for being stupid. I just
absolutely not.
Now, where we pick up with Stargate SG1, the TV show, Colonel Jack O'Neill is played by Richard Dean Anderson, who you may know from the TV show MacGyver.
Okay, I thought I might have recognized him a little bit, and I've not seen the older series MacGyver, but I'm aware enough of it.
It's probably too soon to do this, but in keeping with the tradition of our game that we play in our normal podcasts, where you play a series of clips and I have to guess if it's Gibbs or if it's Ted Bundy or if it's the character from Freaky Friday, we're going to have a similar game where I'm going to play a clip and you have to guess if it's Richard Dean Anderson as Colonel Jack O'Neill in the TV show Stargate SG-1, or if it's his character from MacGyver, the TV show.
Okay.
And so we probably want to wait till after we kind of cover the episode so you get a feel for who Jack O'Neill is, the character, because I think it would be... Go ahead.
I mean, I threw you under the bus. So if you're willing to give me that grace, I will accept it. But if you would like to treat me the same way that I treated you, then I'm more than willing to understand that.
Well, you're a horrible person, and I'm not going to, stoop to your level of depravity. So I'm going to give you the advantage of at least being introduced to the character before forcing you to decide where the quotes come from. So at the end of this deconstruction, we'll play the game.
Alrighty.
So just let it be known, this is called Gateway Drug. This is a spinoff of our Gibbsittomestraight. And at the end of this discussion, we'll actually play our game where you have to decide from a clip, from a out of context clip, if the character Richard Dean Anderson is Jack O'Neill or if it's MacGyver. And we'll do that at the end. So here we go. So we have the original characters, Colonel Jack O'Neill from the TV show, although this time he's played with Richard Dean Anderson, and they make it a point to say that his last name O'Neill in the TV show is spelled with one L, whereas in the movie it's spelled with two L's, and that's pretty much the only throwback that they're going to give from the TV show to the film itself. Daniel Jackson is played by an actor named Michael Shanks, and there'll be additional characters that we'll talk about as we proceed. So you ready? You ready for us to get into the cold open of Children of the Gods Part 1?
Oh, absolutely. I'm so ready.
Okay, here we go. The cold open begins in orbit over Earth with the sun rising in the background. I think to kind of, affirm the setting as science fiction, and the scene shifts down to Earth where we transition into a utility room of some sort, a big open interior room. There's several Air Force airmen, and I had to look this up, by the way. Female air people, to get the language straight, in the Air Force are referred to as airmen. So airmen is a gender neutral term. And so we're in this utility room in a nameless base somewhere, and there's 5 or 6 airmen, and it's a mixed crowd, female and male, and they're playing poker. The female airman is there's one female airman there, and she's nervous that an officer will come down and catch them playing poker. So the implication is that they should not be doing what they're doing. And the implication is that wherever they're at, whatever it is that they're guarding has been forgotten. In the background, you see this tarp covering a large object, which, if you have seen the film, you understand to be the Stargate itself.
Oh, okay.
Right? So that, these airmen are playing poker, clear that they don't care about any danger of where they might get busted by a commissioned officer coming down and seeing that they're shirking their duties somewhat. And that indicates that whatever is in the room has just been long forgotten. But after the female airman observes that she's a little nervous about being caught for kind of shirking her duties, the room itself shakes.
Oh.
Right. So she had initially been kind of dismissed in her concerns, but then the room itself shakes, and the tarp that had been covering this large object in the background falls away, and it's the Stargate revealed.
All right.
Right.
Okay.
And so the other airmen, they're very concerned. This has not happened in their experience. And we see the gate itself start to activate. And when I say activate, there's an outer ring and an inner ring. And the inner ring rotates within the outer ring. And the inner ring contains these Egyptian hieroglyphs, which we now know from the film, the 1994 film, these hieroglyphs are actually coordinates in space.
Right.
So as the inner ring rotates, so the interior, the inner ring of this gate of the circle is rotating, and when it hits the right coordinate, it stops, and it continues to do this as it's dialing. They call it dialing. Until it dials 7 coordinates. That is 1 coordinate, which is the origin, and the 6 other coordinates are the 6 positional coordinates in space.
Okay.
So anyway, we know all that from the movie if we watch the movie. But in the TV show, these airmen are rattled by kind of the reactivation of this long dormant artifact. And the inner ring is circling around and setting these coordinates, which indicates that someone is incoming. So you can kind of go out from the gate or you can come in from the gate. And so the airmen rush to retrieve their weapons, and they're waiting for the gate itself to do whatever it's going to do. And when the 7th coordinate is locked, the way the gate operates, what happens is there's a burst of what appears to be water out of the interior of the gate, which retreats back into the gate, and the interior, which previously had been empty, shimmers in kind of a watery way, indicating that there's an active connection between where you are, in this instance in that utility room, and the distant coordinate out in space, if that makes sense.
Okay, so it's so now there's like a flat surface across the diameter.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So, so my notes here have a burst of what appears to be water launches from the gate and then retreats back. The interior shimmers like a pool almost, and then from the gate, several armored humanoids emerge, and their armor is silver, and they have this huge helmet. Each soldier, these are soldiers, they have this huge helmet that looks like the head of a serpent, right? So it's very stylized, right? And so several of, I think 8 of them come out. They form columns of 4, but they form these columns, and then a final humanoid emerges from the gate, and his armor is gold. So that indicates that he's their leader. Once he steps out of the gate, and he has these 2 separate columns of soldiers in front of him, his serpent helmet opens up and retreats and reveals his true form. And he is humanoid, and he has a royal bearing. So I like what you've said in the past, the language of film. We've determined in the language of film that he is in charge, and these soldiers in that silver armor are his subordinates.
Okay.
The guards in silver and the airmen who are armed as well regard each other for a moment, and then someone opens fire, and then it's just total chaos, right?
Yeah.
It's total pandemonium, and you have on the human side, on the airman side, they're using automatic weapons. So they're firing bullets at these aliens. The aliens have these weapons that appear to be like staffs. So when they're in a situation where they're standing there at attention, they're holding these staffs in front of them. But when they attack, they point the staffs at their enemy, and there's energy bolts that come from them, Star Wars style, right? So there's this firefight between the alien humanoids and the airmen. The airmen, they stand their ground. They are able to kill several of the aliens, but the aliens themselves are ultimately victorious because they have superior weapons. And reinforcements do arrive. Armed Air Force special operators show up. The female airmen, and this is going to be a recurring theme, I think, throughout the show as I've started to rewatch it, because I did a rewatch like 5-6 years ago, right? But as I'm watching it, I'm realizing just how sexist this show is.
Yeah.
And it's not even, you can't even like forgive it. It's not like, well, it was kind of the period of the time, right? It's just sexist. We talked about how the way the scene opened, there were a group of airmen playing poker. One of them was a female, and of course, these aliens kidnapped the female. That you kind of probably saw it coming.
I can't say that I did, but am I surprised? Not necessarily.
Yeah, so the guards grab the female airman. The leader, the one of the gold armor, uses some sort of energy stun weapon on her so that she's kind of oblivious. The reinforcements arrive, but they can't fire because they're going to hurt her. Right?
Right.
A high-ranking uniformed Air Force officer comes on scene. This is a very quick scene, right? So all this happens in very quick succession. But the reinforcements arrive. All the airmen that have been playing poker, they're all dead now because they've been shot up. They've been blown to hell by these energy weapons. The reinforcements arrive. A high-ranking Air Force officer arrives on site and, warns everyone to hold their fire because the female airmen might get hurt. And then there's a hard stare between this Air Force general and this alien in golden armor who's the leader of that contingent. There's a hard stare between them, and then the aliens retreat back through the gate with the female airmen. And when they retreat to the gate, the shimmering, watery aspect of the interior of the gate disappears, and then there's this indication that the Stargate is inert. The connection between in the room with the Air Force room and the distant planet, wherever they came from, that connection has been broken.
So I have a quick question. Whenever we see these aliens, you said that their helmets are kind of snake-like. Can we see their faces at all?
Not through the armor. And I don't think it's a very practical way to design armor because the serpentine heads are gigantic.
Yeah.
Right? And I think within the conceit of the show, I think the explanation is that they have this fearsome armor because they want to intimidate people, right?
Yeah.
But if you've seen the Avengers and the Iron Man movies, when their helmets retreat off their heads, these are practical effects. So they have very large kind of heads, and they press a button somewhere, and there's a hinge that opens up. The serpentine face of the armor opens up, revealing the face of the person inside.
Right.
So, this is a pretty exciting opening, right? There's a lot of shooting. There's aliens. There's military guys and gals, right? Star Wars style energy blasts. And so if you're like me and I'm in my late 20s, I'm hooked. I want to see what happens next.
Yeah.
So any questions or comments or random insults about that opening scene? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I'm following fairly well. Just like we have sort of the promise being fulfilled that is made by the consequences of the end of the movie.
After that happens, there's a shift in tone to a night scene outside of a tranquil home, and a car approaches through its driveway. It's nighttime again, and once the car pulls up into the driveway, it stops. A uniformed Air Force commissioned officer exits the car, knocks on the door, gets no answer, and then the driver says, "Hey, I think there's someone on the roof."
Okay.
So basically, whoever they're looking for is not inside the house, he's on the roof. And so the camera, it's pretty good camera work at this point. It rises from the car to the roof where we see a man in civilian clothes peering intently through a telescope. And so that's what the driver was referring to. And in the time that it takes for the camera to kind of rise from the ground level to the roof, the Air Force officer who had knocked on the door goes around the house, climbs a ladder, and then goes up to the roof and approaches the guy who's in civilian clothes, peering through the telescope. And I have a clip I'd like to show.
Okay.
Yep.
Colonel Jack O'Neill?
Retired.
I'm Major Samuels.
A little piece of advice, Major. Get re-asked to NASA. That's where all the action's gonna be. Out there.
I'm under orders to bring you to see General Hammond, sir.
Never heard of him.
You replace General West?
I'm a busy man, Major.
I can see that, sir. He says it's important. Has to do with the Stargate.
As we come to learn, it's been a year since the events of the film. And since the events of the film, he's retired as a colonel. And you can see from the clip that he's got an intense interest in space. And he's being recalled. Yeah, and he's being recalled the Stargate program because, hey, this alien walk through the Stargate itself shot up a bunch of people and kidnapped an airman. So they reach out to Jack O'Neill and say, hey, I think we kind of need your help on this. So that was a little bit of a longer clip, but the reason that I made a couple of these clips a little bit longer is I wanted to indicate this is a big budget show. And in contrast to NCIS, which I think is a low budget show, probably the most expensive part of NCIS is paying Mark Harmon's salary, right?
Probably.
This was Showtime's attempt, I think, to create premier programming, but in a science fiction vein. The music is all original, and it's not this forgettable techno-pop stuff from NCIS. It's actually an orchestral score. The character of Jack O'Neill, Richard Dean Anderson, he had a great deal of popularity from MacGyver, so I'm sure his salary was pretty high, right? And we'll see as the show progresses that the special effects are pretty good.
I mean, yeah, I'm liking the look of it so far, and there's a funny contrast to the way that you're describing it, because you're talking about there's some sort of silly comic booky fun, and I agree that this at the moment is feeling a little bit like the way that like an issue of Aquaman would start, but it's nice to have something that is going for that, but is clearly not doing it in a like overly cheap way.
Yeah, they put some money into it, and as the show progressed, they got better at being military accurate. As we'll see as we progress, that some of the aspects of the Air Force are not depicted with accuracy, but they put a fair amount of money into this. The production values are very high. The writing is okay, I guess. I mean, it's certainly not high art. And the acting is what you would expect from someone like Richard Dean Anderson.
Mm-hmm.
But,
Doesn't seem bad.
It's not bad. He does an okay job. I will say that I don't know much about Richard Dean Anderson, the person, but the character of Jack O'Neill that he portrays, he's just a weird dude. Right? I didn't really catch it the first time when I was watching episodes here and there, as I could pirate them. Please don't arrest me, FBI. It was over 20 years ago. But when I did the rewatch, I was like, he's just a weird guy, and so that'll become more apparent. As there's some tragedy in his life that will be revealed.
I could tell a little bit from the way that he was interacting with that other officer that he was like the other guy was all nervous and he was just like sitting there completely unbothered. And then what was it? It was like, I'm supposed to be here to take you to this guy. He goes, yeah. Who cares?
Yeah, he conveys an image of being unimpressed the entire series. Yeah. So from here, the scene transitions back to a military base, presumably where the Stargate is. And as it happens, we learn that it's Cheyenne Mountain. As a fellow American, I think you can appreciate the nutty things that the U.S. military has done. While this show is fantastical, in truth, Cheyenne Mountain is a massive military base that the United States military spent billions on building into the side of a mountain so that it can withstand a 30 megaton blast.
That is
Right.
That is also perfectly comic booky. That's great.
And it's also true, right? Cheyenne Mountain is a real military base, and it really can withstand a 30 megaton blast. Like when the history books are written about America, when it finally is no longer an empire, they'll look back on some of the nutty things that the Americans did, and this is going to be one of them.
Oh my goodness.
But Cheyenne Mountain, as I understand it, was initially, for a long time, was where NORAD was located, the monitored airspace between the United States and Canada. In the show, it's called Stargate Command. And, from the film, the Stargate was initially located in Egypt, and it was pulled out of Egypt. So it's a bit of colonialism where the Americans go in and say, hey, this is a fantastic piece of advanced technology. Egyptians, you can't have it anymore. We're taking it. They take it to Cheyenne Mountain, which they call Stargate Command. Okay. And so we have a scene where O'Neill is escorted by a military. I'm going to say that he's an officer, but the thing is that if you look closely, the guy has the same insignia that you would have as a major in the Air Force and also as a sergeant, as an enlisted sergeant. There's this mixture of military insignia that doesn't make any sense whatsoever, right? So whoever did the costume for this completely failed. O'Neill, the Richard Dean Anderson character, he's escorted into the base and down through these elevator. He's goes to an elevator. He has to sign in, and they go down. They're like 10, 15 stories down into the earth. And there he meets with the commander of the base, and that is General George Hammond. Hammond. And General George Hammond is played by the late Don S. Davis. I think he passed away in 2008. So he's very good in this role, actually. The general is the same uniformed officer in the opening scene that appeared and said, "Hey, hold your fire because we don't want to kill the female airmen." It's the same guy. The general is he takes O'Neill, who he knows has been through the Stargate, so he's read into all that, and he takes him into a military morgue on the base where he shows him the dead bodies of some of the alien soldiers that had attacked the base in the previous scene. And there's an Air Force doctor there, and a military doctor comments that they're not human. They're humanoid, but they're not human, and that they appear to have a pouch of some sort cut into their stomachs, similar to that of a kangaroo. So that's very alien, right?
Cut into their stomachs?
Yeah, so it's a cross kind of cut into their stomachs, and the implication is that there's another living being inside those pouches.
Oh, I don't like that.
Yeah, it's pretty gross. But hey, they're aliens, so they get to do stuff like that. the general asks Jack O'Neill, who has had experience with these aliens from the film, he asks if the foe or kind of quasi-god Ra, right, Ra the sun god, the general's very direct to O'Neill. He says, hey, is Ra actually dead? Did you actually kill him? Because in the previous scene, hey, check it out. One of the aliens that came through in the gold armor, he sure looked like Ra.
Oh, right. Okay.
That doesn't quite add up. And so he's like, hey, this character that just came through and killed a bunch of my guys and kidnapped one of my airmen fits the description that you gave about Ra in your report in your after mission about going to Abydos. O'Neill responds resolutely that, hey, you know what? Ra is dead. So I don't know what's going on here, but whoever this Joker was, it's not Ra, because we nuked his ass. Because, that's what the American military does. They just solve problems terminally. So they return to the general's office, and on the walk back to the general's office, O'Neill sees a couple of people that he recognizes that were on the mission to Abydos in the film. And these are officers that had been with him on the initial mission. And so that's somewhat disturbing. It indicates that whatever's going on, the U.S. Air Force is reassembling this team.
I'm sorry, I was a little bit jumbled by that last part, that they're going to our main O'Neill guy. He's going with some other people to interrogate the survivors of the alien attack.
Almost. So what the way it unfolds is that the commander of the base, a general, takes O'Neill into a morgue and says, there's a bunch of dead aliens here. They attacked this base.
Yes.
You told us that they had been taken care of. But hey, they're here. So what's going on?
Gotcha.
And he says to the O'Neill character, you told us that you had killed Ra, the alien bad guy from the film. But hey, we just got attacked again. And O'Neill's like, I don't know what the fuck's going on, dude. I nuked the fuck out of Ra, and I don't know what's going on here. And so the scene shifts from the morgue, where the general was showing him these dead bodies of these aliens. It shifts back to the general's office, where they've returned to his office. And on the way back to his office, the O'Neill character sees some familiar faces from the previous mission.
Oh, okay, yes.
Yeah. He sees these guys that he had served with previously that had gone to Abydos in the film. And, it's not good that he's seeing these guys, because it indicates that, hey, the Air Force, which is a force to be reckoned with, right? The Air Force is reassembling this team because something's not right, and they're interrogating each one of them.
Oh, okay. That's what I was missing. Yes, okay.
Yeah, okay. So he sees these two guys, Wachowski and Ferretti, I think the guys' names are. We'll get into it. And they had served under his command in the initial mission to Abydos. Jack O'Neill is in a lot of trouble. He's in trouble with the Air Force. You do not want to be on the wrong side of the Department of Defense.
Yeah.
The shenanigans that he was up to in the first film, where he left Daniel Jackson to his own devices and then lied to the Department of Defense that, hey, no, it's okay. I did what you asked me to do. I blew up everything. That was a lie. This incident at the base at Stargate Command has revealed that he was lying, and they had called in some of his previous teammates to interrogate them as well. And if you're Jack O'Neill, and Colonel is fairly high ranking, but it's not the highest rank. So the full force of the U.S. military bearing down on you, you don't want that. That's not going to be a pleasant experience. The general cross-examined O'Neill a little bit about the fate of Ra, who was killed in the film. He was destroyed. So technically speaking, Jack O'Neill did follow his mission command. But Hammond asks about Ra, and are you sure he's dead? And O'Neill's like, yeah, I blew him up like you do with the nuclear weapon. And then Hammond, the general, asks O'Neill about the Egyptologist Daniel Jackson. If you remember, when O'Neill had returned from Abydos, the alien planet in the film, he had assured the Department of Defense, the Pentagon, that they had detonated the nuclear weapon and that it had killed everyone on Abydos. Of course, he had actually detonated the weapon on the spacecraft, and he had left enslaved population who were now freed. He left them unmolested on the other side. He left Daniel Jackson there, and he essentially lied. He didn't say he did kill Ra. He didn't say where he detonated the nuclear weapon. So Hammond asked him about, hey, Daniel Jackson, are you sure Daniel Jackson was killed when you detonated the nuclear weapon on the other side? O'Neill says, yeah, he was blowed up. He blowed up real good. And Hammond, though, continues this line of questioning, and he has an adjutant, his assistant, Air Force Major Samuels. So they cross-examine O'Neill about Daniel Jackson's fate, and they seem hostile and mistrustful of O'Neill's responses. And O'Neill declares that, hey, you know what? I did, in fact, blow up the bomb. I did detonate the bomb. Daniel Jackson, hey, he's dead, right? He can't survive a nuclear weapon. And so the general says, okay, well, if all that's true, then you won't mind if I sent another bomb through. So the scene shifts from the scene where O'Neill and Hammond were sparring with each other. It goes back to the room where the Stargate is, and there's some technicians worrying over a big device, right? It's another nuclear weapon. And Hammond says, hey, since you already blew up everything on the other side, you're not going to have a problem with me sending another nuclear bomb through. And oh, by the way, the one that you sent through was a Mark III bomb. I'm sending a Mark V, right? Which is the implication is it's a much bigger bomb. He's like, you're okay with this, right? And so right. I have a clip.
You're sending another bomb?
Mark V this time. Unless you have something to add.
General Hammond, sir. I regret to inform you that my report was not entirely accurate.
You didn't detonate the bomb.
I did detonate the bomb, sir, and it was aboard Ra's spacecraft, so it did kill him and eliminate the risk to Earth.
However,
Ra's ship was in orbit above the planet at the time. Neither the gate nor anything else on the planet was destroyed.
I just want to point out that recognize the characters of O'Neill and Colonel in civilian clothes and General Hammond, who's cross-examining him. And there's a third character who's an assistant to General Hammond. And that is the most realistic character in this whole thing. Right? Because he's just a dick. Right.
Yeah, I could tell because he's the guy that went and got O'Neill in the first place.
Yep.
But now, like, seeing him, he just walked up there to be like, "Oh, yeah, is that right?"
Yeah.
Like, let me give me the bad news. Let me look at me while you tell me.
Yeah, and he's just trying to please his boss.
Yeah.
Because it's completely a political game at that point to try to get ahead in rank, right? So he's just trying to make his boss happy. And you could hear kind of the background music. It's very well done. The production values are very good. So the general obviously is not happy with O'Neill because O'Neill has lied. And this is a super secret mission. I mean, it's helpful sometimes in this show to take yourself out of the show itself and think about, like, how would this go down in real life? If the Air Force had discovered an ancient technology that could take you to another planet, of course, they would share that information with as few people as possible, right?
Right.
And the people that you would share it with, presumably, would have the professional ethics that they would, keep it a secret, obviously, and they would follow orders. And he didn't. So, like the immediate conclusion at this point, where this show should go from this point on, is he's taken to Leavenworth and imprisoned for the rest of his life.
Yeah.
Right? That's what should actually happen, right? But what happens in the show is the general tells his men to escort O'Neill to a holding room and that he'll figure out what to do with him. When O'Neill is taken to a room with some bunks, he's taken there and he's reunited with some of his former team members that he had seen in a previous scene. The fact that he saw them kind of being escorted in and being questioned indicated that they're all in big trouble, right?
Right.
And I don't know, maybe I'm a little bit hypersensitive having served in the military, but I'm like, oh man, I'm fucked. I am so fucked. They're going to put me under the jail, right? Like
it still fills you with a sense of unease.
Oh man, and like they're going to torture me. right? I don't know what they're going to do to me, but I'm not going to come out of this okay. But he gets taken to this room, and he gets reunited with one of his team members. Major Charles Kowalski is the character's name, and that's played by Jay Acavone. Hopefully I'm pronouncing that correctly, Jay. I'm sorry if I didn't. And he assures him that neither he nor the other team member, who's a Lieutenant Ferretti, who's played by Brent State. Brent State is his name. He assures them that, hey, we didn't reveal anything. We didn't tell them anything. We stonewalled them. We gave them the line that we had been perpetuating since this mission, that, hey, we blew up the bomb and Daniel Jackson's dead. So as they're having this conversation, General Hammond just abruptly enters the room, because that's what you do when you're a general, right? You just you don't announce yourself. You just burst right in. And he's followed by his assistant, Major Samuels, and he explains he has reconsidered sending the bomb. He asks O'Neill, like, how many civilians were on Abydos when you left? And O'Neill says, there were maybe about 5,000 or so, a significant amount, right? So if he sends the bomb through, that's an act of mass murder, right? Yeah. So Hammond says that he's open to suggestions. He doesn't quite know what to do. And O'Neill says that he suggests that he himself and a team, presumably of his former teammates, should go back through the gate and investigate what's going on, to try to get to the bottom of why more aliens are coming through and shooting up people, right? We thought we had dealt with this already, but they seem to be proliferating, which is utterly ludicrous, because O'Neill has already demonstrated to the Department of Defense that he's an unreliable person.
Or at the very least, he's going to make decisions that are biased towards the people there.
Yeah, exactly. And so the first point of kind of divergence from reality is that he would suggest that, hey, why don't you just give us a bunch of guns and equipment, and we're going to go back through this, advanced, sophisticated piece of alien technology that we don't understand, and that I've already demonstrated that I'm not trustworthy, but trust me, bro, you can trust me this time. Right.
Second time's the charm.
Yeah, it's utterly ludicrous. But O'Neill says, hey, I got an idea. Send me and my team back to the gate. We'll investigate. We'll figure out what's going on, where these aliens are all coming from, and we'll determine if Daniel Jackson is still alive. And remember, Daniel Jackson is the archaeologist. He's a civilian. He's not military.
Yes.
And so the general says, you know what? All right, we're going to send a probe through first. And this is the show dating itself, because in today's terms, they would just go to Best Buy and buy a drone.
That's exactly what I was thinking, yeah.
Yeah. But instead, the general says, we're going to send a probe through it, but we have to retrieve it from this other laboratory that the Air Force maintains. It's going to take a couple of days. And I was just struck by how, in my own lifetime, the technologies have advanced. Like, I would just throw my cell phone through. Right? Yeah. With the camera on. But O'Neill says, hey, I got a better way to connect with Daniel Jackson if he's on the other side, if he's still alive. I have a better way to do this. Keep in mind, they're in this holding room away from the gate room. And the gate room is the centerpiece of this base, right? Mm-hmm. Because it holds this priceless piece of alien technology. There's all the security around it. They're in a separate holding room. And O'Neill says, hey, I know how to get through to Daniel Jackson. You don't need a probe. He looks at the table that's in there in the room, and he grabs a box of Kleenex. And I should say that one of the recurring themes in the original film was that Daniel Jackson, he had severe allergies. So in the film, they were setting up this dichotomy between this geek, scientist, academic Daniel Jackson and this hardened military guy. And Daniel Jackson has all these allergies. And so it's set up as a recurring joke that he's always sneezing.
Right.
And so O'Neill says, hey, you don't have to go off and send for this expensive probe. I have a better way to contact Daniel Jackson. And he grabs a box of Kleenex in this holding room, and he just directly walks unescorted back to the gate room. Right? So, all these details sort of escape me, even on my rewatch. So he just sort of charges out of the room where he's being essentially held prisoner. He charges out of the room, goes back to the gate room with his box of Kleenex, and he explains that Daniel Jackson had these allergies that I described. He has them dial up the Abydos address, because keep in mind the Stargate is essentially a GPS galactically. And so you program a series of addresses. There's 7 addresses, the point of origin and the 6 coordinates. And then it makes this connection with the gate on the other side. So he has them dial this up. And every time that they, like, it takes a significant amount of energy to establish a wormhole. Right?
Okay, that was another one of my thoughts.
Yeah. So I don't know how expensive it is to just like randomly dial up. You're like, I'm bored. I'm just going to dial up Abydos. It's probably like $500 million every time they dial out. Right? I don't know what it costs, but it's a lot of money. And so O'Neill says, just dial up Abydos. The Stargate goes through this elaborate dialing sequence, right, where each of the 7 coordinates is locked in. The entire base shakes, indicating how powerful the energies are that's involved. There's this sequence where this watery explosion emanates forth from the gate and then retreats, so you're seeing this shimmering pool. O'Neill approaches the gate and just tosses the box of Kleenex through, right? And once he tosses the box through, the gate shuts down, and that's his statement to Daniel Jackson, essentially. And so he says to the general that, hey, it's going to take a little time for Jackson on the other side, Daniel Jackson on the other side, if he is there, for him to discover this Kleenex box and to send a return message. He validates this decision to do it in this way because if any random point of contact within the Air Force reaches out to Jackson on the other side, Jackson's not going to trust them.
Right.
Because Daniel Jackson knows through his conversations with O'Neill in the film that, hey, if the military reaches out to you, they're probably going to blow you up.
Yeah.
Right? Like, we already had one nuke, and guess what? The U.S. Air Force has a few nukes. So they have some to spare. So you should
They're not afraid to use the floppy disks.
And they're not afraid. That's right. So you should be careful about this. But when he sends the box of Kleenex through, that's an inside joke. So
you'd think maybe it would be more than just like, it would be a tiny bit more than, here's some Kleenex. That it might be like, I'm going to take this box of Kleenex with a note in it or something. Just a tiny bit more.
Yeah, I agree with you. It should be a tiny bit more, although, we're not living in reality.
Yeah.
And as the suspension of disbelief goes, I'm willing to go with this one. But, it would have been better if he scribbled out a note that said, hey, we're not going to blow you up. It's okay to respond, right?
Yeah.
But he observes to the general that, hey, it's going to take a little while for Jackson to find this box and to figure out what the message is. The scene shifts to the general and Jack O'Neill and others, and also the general's adjutant, Major Samuels, and other people. They're waiting in a conference room. And this conference room figures predominantly in the series. It overlooks the gate room. So the scene shifts, and it indicates that they've been waiting probably for a few hours. See them twiddling their thumbs and stuff. And suddenly the entire room and the entire base starts to rumble and shake, which indicates that the gate is active. And I should say, when you are on the receiving end of the gate, you have no control over someone dialing in.
Okay.
Right? So you can't turn it off, right? They are at the mercy of someone else dialing into the gate. They can't stop it. And so the room rumbles, indicating that the gate is active again. They run down to the gate room. Where the gate is fully active. You see this shimmering interior in the gate. There's a moment there where they're kind of observing this active Stargate with a watery pool in the interior, and then a box of Kleenex is tossed through.
Yep.
And the gate shuts down. And O'Neill approaches the Kleenex, and he picks it up, the box. He looks at it for a moment, and then he smiles, so you know that there's been an active connection there. And he tosses the box over to Major Samuels, and it has the camera pans to the side of the box, and it has a message written on it that says, quote, "Thanks, send more." So
I knew that it was going to be send more. I knew that it was going to be send more. That's so funny.
Yeah. So I mean, there'll be no surprises in the show, right? Right. To the extent, if you go to the comic book store and pick up, your average Marvel comic, you're not going to be challenged in terms of plot. But that's one of the saving graces of the show. It's completely forgettable,
There's a comfortability to it.
Absolutely. But this affirms that Daniel Jackson is actually alive and on the other side and is able to communicate. And O'Neill says to the general, hey, now that we've established this connection, we know he's okay, I request permission to form a team and to go back through the gate and to go back to Abydos. And to my amazement, the general agrees rather than sending him to jail.
Yeah.
Right. And so the general says, okay, I approve this contingent on approval from the President of the United States, which that's actually an important statement because it indicates that the secrecy of this program is such that decisions at a high level are made exclusively by the President of the United States. Right?
Yeah.
A throwaway comment but it becomes more important in subsequent episodes, and you start to understand the value and the secrecy behind this program. The scene shifts to the following morning at a briefing in the early morning, because everyone in the military gets up really early, except for me. When I served, I was slept in to the extent that I could. So the scene shifts to a conference room, and so you have the general, and you have O'Neill, now in uniform. He's been in civilian clothes this entire time, right? And you have him there with the general. You have Major Samuels. You have Major Kowalski is there, and Lieutenant Ferretti. So they're assembling the old team, right? And there's a few other Air Force people there. I should say, I think I've said this previously, but just to reaffirm, NCIS was all about propaganda. This is all about military propaganda.
Yeah.
Like, it's shameless, right?
It's all about making these guys look kind of cool and
competent.
Yeah.
Right. And also empathetic, because they make difficult decisions in morally gray areas, to the extent that you can have a morally gray area in a comic book plot.
Right.
So it's complete recruiting material. So, the scene shifts to the following morning. They're in this conference room, and it's clear they're going to have a briefing about this forthcoming mission back to Abydos. And the general is the last one in the room, and everyone's standing, and when, he's the guy in charge, so he's sitting at the head of the table. And when he sits, everyone else sits. And the first thing he says is, "Where is Captain Carter?" Indicating that there's a missing person that's not there yet for the briefing. And Colonel O'Neill, he seems a little bit puzzled. He says, who is Captain Carter? And the general replies, and he says that, well, I'm assigning Sam Carter to this mission. Sam Carter.
Okay.
And O'Neill responds. He says, well, I would prefer to assemble my own team. And the general says that not this time. I'm assigning Captain Carter to this team from the Pentagon because she is an expert on the Stargate technology. As he's saying that, a figure approaches the conference room. It's Captain Carter, and Samantha. She is played by Amanda Tapping, who's this blonde-haired, blue-eyed ingenue, I guess is the right way to put that. And she enters the room, which is otherwise occupied by all men. This is 1997 that this was filmed. It's fascinating through the prism of looking back to this 1997 show about how feminism and women's rights were still considered to be a novelty.
Right.
It's kind of unsettling, actually, because we like to think that these things have always been true, but they haven't, like in our living memory. So Captain Carter, this character played by Amanda Tapping, she enters the room and she introduces herself, and immediately Major Kowalski, this is the former teammate of O'Neill that was on the initial mission, he observes that, of course, she goes by Sam Carter, not Samantha Carter. Mm-hmm. And O'Neill starts the briefing because, he's going to reveal what he knows and what his team members knows to the other people at the conference room. He's going to reveal to them what he knows about Abydos and what they can expect to see. And he starts off by trying to goad Samantha Carter. I have a clip here, and I've named this clip Goading Sam.
For those of you on your first trip through the gate, you should be prepared for what to expect.
Well, I've practically memorized your report from the first mission, sir. I'd like to think I've been preparing for this all my life.
I think what the Colonel is saying is, have you ever pulled out of a simulated bombing run in an F-16 at 8+ Gs?
Yes.
Well, it's way worse than that.
By the time you get to the other side, you're frozen stiff, like you've just been through a blizzard.
That's a result of the compression your molecules undergo during the millisecond required for reconstitution.
Oh, here we go. Another scientist. General, please.
Theoretical astrophysicist.
Which means...
Means she's smarter than you are, Colonel. Especially in matters related to the Stargate.
So go ahead. Go ahead.
Well, there's an interesting balance there that I think I can already see playing up, which is that Sam Carter is very clearly, or at least it seems, is like both very impressed, trying to be very prepared, trying to be ultra competent. And it's unclear if she is doing that in order to impress O'Neill, or to sort of be like, I'm just as capable, or if it's a proving herself mechanism. Is she trying to do it to show off, or is she trying to do it so that she is like accepted? And the thing I'm immediately getting is that it's not working.
Yeah, it's incredibly pandering, right?
Yeah.
I mean, there's like, we could diverge into a 15 or 20-minute conversation just into gender issues as seen in 1997. Like, there's a conceit against women from these men. The female to whom they're presented, she has to be perfect, right? So they've selected an actress who conforms explicitly to the beauty standard. Blonde hair and blue eyes, just like an Aryan dream. Not only is she physically unattainable, right? But she describes herself as a theoretical astrophysicist, which is like on another plane of intellectual existence.
Yeah.
You know, to that point, some of the other men in the room are encouraging her. The general says, well, she's smarter than you, and you know, especially when it comes to the gate, which is also condescending, right? She can't just walk in the room and just be part of the team.
Right. There has to be some sort of reason.
Yeah. And she has to. She can't. She has to be flawless.
Yeah.
I guess I felt a mild discomfort with this when I first watched it years ago. When I rewatched, I was like, "Oh man, this is fucked up."
Yeah.
This is just fucked up. But at the same time, I have to give the writers credit for trying in 1997. You know?
Well, and this is one of those situations where you're looking at a piece of media and you're trying to wonder, is this a writer conforming or trying to point something out?
Yeah, I think it was probably some combination of both.
Yeah.
And I will say that, you know, this is a long-lived show. It was 10 seasons, so it stopped airing in 2007.
Mm-hmm.
There were scenes and plot lines in later episodes that were much more even-handed about dealing with gender issues. I thought a little bit quaint that the writers wanted to indicate that this woman is just as good as the rest of you guys, but also she's a perfect 10, and hey, you know what? She's a genius. Right? 4 stars for trying, I guess? I don't know.
Some amount of stars.
Yeah, some amount of stars. Yeah, I don't know how many. But I definitely wanted to pull out that particular scene to point that out. My memory's a little bit dim, but I did see the original Showtime airing of this episode where they've cut a lot of stuff out. The mainstream viewing of this, because again, there was nudity in the Showtime episode. There was an extended scene here where she said something about her reproductive organs being on the inside. I forget, right? But they made a bigger deal out of it in the Showtime airing. But hey, you know what? 1997, it's a product of its time. Hopefully we've advanced somewhat since then, although in recent events, I'm not sure if that's exactly true. But anyway, so, okay. She makes her entrance. She in that exchange, I cut it out towards the end because I don't want it to be too long. She achieves a level of grudging respect between herself and O'Neill. So O'Neill declare. Oh, actually, yeah. Here, I should say this. And the O'Neill's next line is that he doesn't have a problem with women. He likes women.
Okay.
His problem is with scientists, right? Which was established in the first film. Like, there was a tension between him and Daniel Jackson, who was this geeky scientist, right? The writers completely circumvented the sexist issues here by saying, well, O'Neill's problem is not with her that she's a woman, but just that she's a scientist, right? Yeah,
I'm going to start using that line.
Whatever, man, whatever. So It's pretty shameless, actually,
Yeah.
in kind of watching it from a 2025 perspective. Our friend Major Samuels, declares, and I have to agree with him, the safest thing to do is just to bury the gate, just to get rid of the gate, just to
Just
take
make it impossible to
Yeah,
get out of. Yeah.
exactly. And he's not wrong. And he says, hey, the safest thing to do is just bury the gate, and then it'll be impossible for any more aliens to get through. O'Neill counters and said, well, okay, however, you should know that the aliens, in addition to having these stargates where they can get here instantaneously, they also have faster-than-light spaceships. So guess what? They're going to get here eventually, even if it's not through the gate. So the general says, okay, taking all that into consideration, I am authorizing you, O'Neill, to take this team, including Captain Carter, through the gate, and he tells them that you have 24 hours to find Dr. Daniel Jackson and to assess if there's any more alien threats. And if I don't hear from you, and this is actually accurate from a military perspective, if I don't hear from you in 24 hours, I'm going to send the Mark V through and blow everything up. So one thing I've learned from being in the military is they enjoy finality. Right?
And to a degree, I understand that, and it also works great in a plot sort of way, and it's just like, okay, from the moment they go through, they know that they have a ticking clock, and that this has a personal detail in it. I won't necessarily dispose or expose. But I have a family member who went through a very specific medical thing, and it's a thing that is very consistently used on medical dramas, on TV shows. And they always get very distressed by how often they're on medical dramas. And I'm like, well, you have to understand, whenever you're watching these shows and they have this specific thing come up, it means that there's a built-in clock. There's so much tension that they create already. There's this concept or possibility of this thing not happening or not working, and the exact same thing is being done here, where they have a task, they have all of this on the line, they have a timer, so it's inevitable that there's going to be a lot of tension right before this thing possibly doesn't happen.
Oh, of course. And I don't have to tell you that given that they have a 24-hour time frame towards the end of the two-parter, right? It's a two-part episode. Towards the end, they come down to the wire. And Major Samuel said, hey, let's just bury the gate. And O'Neill says, hey, actually, even if we do that, they have faster-than-light ships. So they're going to get here eventually, and we should probably proactively look into this, blah, blah, blah. And so they're agreed they're going to go through the gate back to Abydos. Fine. Any questions, comments, or random insults about this so far?
I was going to say that I was curious at the beginning about whether or not they possessed faster than light travel, because if they did, then I could see that being a semi-reasonable excuse for why O'Neill chose not to blow up the Stargate. Because if they had faster than light travel, then that means at any given moment they could suddenly arrive there. There would be no other way to prepare. But if they have the Stargate, then that means they could just, at least theoretically show up, and they could go over to Abydos rather than having to wait for them to show up via the faster than light travel.
Yeah, I mean, you're very astute. As the plot unfolds, we'll find that there are other avenues of approach to Earth that in addition to the gate to Abydos. So it is in their interest to retain that gate to Abydos, do some reconnaissance, and find out just what are they up against, right? Mm-hmm. At this point, all we know is that there's a direct link between Earth and Abydos, and this other unnamed alien has come through. It's a mystery at this point. We don't know where he came from, and now that we've got our team assembled, most of our team assembled, and the general says to O'Neill, you have 24 hours to sort this out, or I'm going to blow you all up, right? And to your point earlier, it sets a clock ticking, and of course, because we are seasoned consumers of media, of course, at the end of the episode, we're going to come down to the wire where the clock is ticking, and it's either O'Neill and his team come through at the last minute, or there's going to be a mushroom cloud.
Right.
And I do appreciate that the general ordered a Mark V rather than a Mark III, just to make sure that they not only would blow it up, but they would blow it up like really good, right?
Yeah.
Because the implication that it's a bigger bomb. The scene at that point shifts back to the gate room the following morning. We see the team, including Captain Carter, in combat fatigues. So in the conference room, of course, they were in dress uniform, and here in the gate room, they're ready for bear, and so they're in combat fatigues. They have weapons and these huge packs of supplies. The gate has already been activated. O'Neill and Captain Carter and Major Kowalski and Lieutenant whatever his name was, Ferretti, they're ready to walk through the gate. And the general says to O'Neill, "Hey, this time, maybe you should bring Daniel Jackson back," right? Like you said you were going to do.
I was wondering if that was going to come up.
Yeah. And again, the whole precept is ludicrous because if all this had come to light that O'Neill had lied about his primary mission on a top secret, like the most top secret. This is not parachuting behind enemy lines and then blowing up some rail lines. This is alien technology, man. Right.
And one of in my mind, I'm realizing that I'm comparing this to a very different kind of science fiction, specifically the SCP universe, which I don't have time to explain on podcast, but people that are listening, if they know about it, will understand what I mean. And the SCP universe is grounded in a whole different way, but is also ridiculous in a whole different way than this is. And I think are taking all of the places that I'm expecting them to go. I'm not necessarily they're not going, or at least some of the ideas, like if I were writing this story, then there are a few different ways that I would be taking it, but I do like where they are headed. Like one of the next things I'm thinking of, and maybe this will come up, is that I would expect if they were like, oh, that one guy has been on this alien planet with humanoids that have been on that alien planet, as soon as he gets back, we need to quarantine all of these people.
Yeah.
Like, we need to monitor them for we don't even know how long. Because what if they have some weird new disease?
No, it's a really good point. And I like the way you describe that is grounded in some ways that are ridiculous in others. And that was, I found to be one of the charms of the show. That the humans are presented as being occasionally out of their league, right? That they're plucky. Right, the humans are plucky. The U.S. military is plucky. We don't often think of them in that context, but occasionally they make mistakes, and they're clearly outgunned, and it stretches the bounds of credulity at times that this primitive race, I'm talking about the humans, are able to maintain their own against this technologically advanced civilization, but they find ways to try to explain that. Like they say, why are our primitive projectile weapons effective against these advanced aliens? Because they didn't prepare for that. Like they're so far beyond that it's a surprise to them. So it's just, you take everything with a grain of salt, and if you don't think too much, it's just, like I say, big dumb fun.
And that is another point of comparison that I have been drawing in my head, which is with the Three Body Problem series, which is also about humanity in various times and various forms facing off against this very advanced alien race. Frankly, not holding their own in most respects. Like, they find ways to, but usually it is either down to coincidence or good luck. And in this case, it seems to be a little bit more, I was going to say convenient, but it doesn't feel convenient. It seems like it has more weight, and it seems like whatever alien empire or whatever it is, alien power, isn't quite as advanced as the one in that bit of media. So it feels a little bit more understandable. And the idea of those aliens just not being prepared makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, they make it a point throughout the subsequent episodes to say that part of the reason that they're able to gain some advances against these aliens is that the aliens just don't consider them to be a threat.
Right.
And so they're not really resourcing a lot against the humans because they just think that they're just not that consequential, and so they're able to see a bunch of tactical gains. until, I mean, I'm not going to spoil everything. Like, the
Right.
humans win. I mean, there's 10
Well, yeah.
seasons, right? So, there's a lot of back and forth, but eventually the humans are ascended. Eventually, there is a later episode where these aliens, and by the way, I never mentioned what their name is. Their name is Goa Uld. So it's GOA, so it's Golf Uniform Alpha, and then apostrophe ULD, or Uniform Lima Delta. Sorry, so Goa Uld. And what's interesting in this show is that some people will pronounce it Goa Uld, Goa hyphen Uld, and other people will just pronounce it Gould, Goauld. And they never explain that. They just sort of say, hey, some people pronounce it Gould, some people pronounce it Goa Uld. Assuming we go through any of the subsequent episodes, if there's ever a point where you're not sure if something is alien or not, the litmus test is there an apostrophe in the name? Right? If there's an apostrophe in the name, yep, it's alien. No, no problem. The show goes through. They have to try to explain some of these things in passing, and they say that we're not really perceived as a threat, and so they're not really coming after us. But later on in the seasons, the aliens do come after them. They're like, okay, you know what? Fuck you guys, right? Like, you've annoyed us plenty, and now we're coming after you guys. There's 10 seasons here. There's 17 seasons of NCIS and still filming. We're never going to get through this in our lifetimes, right? So I will say, for the purposes of just being completionist, this show lasted long enough that there were a few episodes that were just completely bonkers, where the writers said, let's just have fun with this episode. So there's an episode 100 is an homage to Star Trek, to Farscape. I don't know if you know the Farscape
I've heard of it.
Yeah. So it's just an homage to all these different science fiction franchises. And the show, to its credit, eventually becomes self-aware enough that it starts to make fun of itself. And I found that to be really engaging, where I started to burn out a little bit when it took itself too seriously. They realized that they needed to go a little gonzo at times, and that really kept me, engaged as a watcher.
Yeah, I can see that. Helping.
So it's a fun show. I don't know if I want to condemn you to watching this show all 10 seasons, but I did it, and I'm not completely. It wasn't a complete waste of time.
So, are we already at the end of this sort of division into the first 2-ish episodes?
We're very close. There? Yeah, we're very close. I'm nearing the end here. So the way I broke this up was all the events leading up to the mission back to Abydos, which is where we're going to get to now. And then our next recording session, assuming you don't walk away from this in disgust, will be the second half, which will be their adventures on Abydos itself and their eventual return to Earth.
Alrighty. Okay.
So here we go.
Sounds like a good way to break it up.
Yeah, it sort of naturally broke itself up that way. So we're back in the gate room. The team is in combat fatigues. They're ready, for action. They have weapons, and they have all these packs of supplies and so forth. They enter the room. The gate has already been activated, so you see this kind of shimmering, watery interior of the gate. And General Hammond tells O'Neill, hey, this time you should bring Daniel Jackson back like you promised the first time around, like you didn't do. And so there's this scene where they travel through the wormhole to Abydos itself. And this is the first time that, from our perspective as the viewer, as the humans, because, we're the proxy for the team, where we actually go through the gate. And so there's the sequence where, spanning through stars, right, through this tunnel-like experience, and we end up on the other side on Abydos, which is this desert planet, and the team arrives in a big room that appears to be the interior of, like, one of these, I don't know how to put this, like, it's just like an Egyptian interior tomb of a room, I guess, right, with hieroglyphs on the wall. One of the things that happens here in these early episodes, which is resolved in later episodes, is that when people go through the gate, they're very cold when they come out on the other side. The team is shown as being shivering and frost on them, and in one throwaway moment in this scene that I personally found a little bit offensive. The team gets through. They're clearly uncomfortable because, Stargate, wormhole. But they show Sam Carter throwing up. in the background. Almost as like, yeah, she made it, but she's the weakest member of the team.
Right. I mean, I think that's like there's the moment in the boardroom scene or in the briefing scene where one of the other guys that I guess had been there before says all this stuff about like, have you ever done this, and this? And she says, yes. And then he goes, it's worse than that.
Yeah.
And that is that it feels like a little bit of a payoff to maybe that, but it does feel a little bit like a betrayal. I can understand that.
Yeah, I don't know why they put that in there. There was no need for it whatsoever. The writers clearly set her up to be a foil to the male members of the team, and a competent foil, and someone who is capable of enduring the hardships that they've endured, but then they show her in this throwaway moment as being very distressed about the passage to the Stargate in ways that the other members are not.
Yeah.
But okay, all right, I mean they're trying. They're trying to be as sensitive as they can be to gender issues in 1997. So here we go. So they're now through the gate. They're in Abydos. They're in this big stone room that appears to be the interior of some tomb of some sort. But there's items that indicate that people have been living in that room, like recently, right? So it's not like this abandoned, desolate, decayed arena. Warm embers of a fire, for example. There's clothing strewn about. Air Force team, they don't know what to expect, so they come through with guns drawn. And so they slowly start to fan out into the room. But as they do that, several humans appear from behind stone columns and different nooks and crannies with ostensibly human weapons. So these are humans that are not part of this team, and they're dressed in robes and other types of garments you would visualize and think about what you would wear in the desert, right?
Right.
But they have human weapons. There's this tense standoff between the Air Force team and these Abydos humans, and the tension is broken by a man who enters the scene also in robes, and he's wearing glasses, and the glasses have tape around them, so you kind of see where this is going, right?
Yeah.
So this guy enters the room, and he speaks in a language that is clearly not English. I don't know what it is, right? Like I say, no one really knows what ancient Egyptian sounded like. But he says something that clearly indicates that he wants his people to lower their weapons. And this is obviously Dr. Daniel Jackson. This is an actor played... so the actor, his name is Michael Shanks. And he's the one that they left behind. He's gone native to a certain extent. He has a wife there now who's an Abydos native. Share is their name. And he greets O'Neill because they recognize each other. And O'Neill, in keeping with his perspective that he doesn't like scientists, he had an uneasy relationship with Daniel Jackson. He walks right past him, doesn't acknowledge him at all, and he greets one of the natives there, a young man, and that person is Skara that he had referred to earlier in the episode. And they have a hug, they kind of pat each other on the back, so they're glad to see each other and so on. Colonel O'Neill had intimated in an earlier scene that he had a son, and that this young man Skara reminded him of his son. So there's a connection there that will be revealed later in subsequent episodes. But after he has this exchange with Skara, he's like a father figure to Skara. Then at that point he turns and he greets Daniel Jackson. Jackson observes that he knew it was just a matter of time before the truth would come out. The Department of Defense would understand that he had not been killed. They had not detonated the nuke in the way that they said they had, and that the military would be back.
Right.
And as he says this, he is joined by his wife, Share, who is love interest. And O'Neill explains to Daniel Jackson that the reason they're back is that there have been other aliens, Goa'uld, that they were familiar with, right, but different ones, that had attacked the base on Earth, Stargate Command, and that one of them, from the description that was given to him, looked like the sun god Ra that they had killed in the film, right?
Right.
And Daniel Jackson insists that that whoever it was could not have come from their gate in Abydos, because they constantly guard it. And he says something to the effect of,
Right.
we guard this 36 hours a day, sort of indicating that they're in a different orbital plane around their sun, and so their day is 36 hours. And he says, but I think I can help you find out where these mysterious aliens came from. I can help you out and figure it out, but I can't do it right now because there's a sandstorm outside, and we're locked in here in this room while we wait out the sandstorm.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So there's a little bit more external pressure.
Yeah.
The ticking clock.
Right. So they have to wait a little bit, and he says, "Hey, and this is sort of obvious, right? I mean, it just sort of unfolds in ways that are patently obvious." And he says, "Hey, while we wait for the sandstorm to pass, and for me to take you to another place where all will be revealed, why don't you join us for dinner?"
Oh.
Right. So, of course, there's going to be a sequence afterwards where the U.S. military people are presented with exotic foods and, by the natives of Abydos, and it'll be a joke and so on. When he says this, and he says, "Hey, there's a sandstorm outside, and we're going to have to wait. You can join us for dinner." At the end of that exchange, there's an exterior shot of where they're at, and they're inside a giant pyramid that is reminiscent of the Great Pyramid, the big one. So it's very reminiscent of that. And there's the sandstorm that's blowing, and so but it indicates that how tiny they are inside this giant structure, in this huge desert planet. And so we get to the dinner scene, and the Air Force team, they're commingling with all the Abydos natives, and there's some banter back and forth. And then Daniel Jackson insists that the alien that attacked the base could not have come to the Abydos gate, but from another gate. And up to this point, the understanding has been there's only two gates, the one on Earth and the one on Abydos. That's it.
Right.
And O'Neill, Colonel O'Neill and Captain Carter, they push back and say, "Hey, there's only two Stargates." And Jackson says, "Hey, I can clear up this mystery for you. I want to show you something." The sandstorm, it's very convenient timing, right? But as he says that, the sandstorm is over, and they leave the front entrance of the pyramid that they're in. The camera retreats and pans back to show miles and miles of sand dunes. The sandstorm is over. They're exiting this gigantic structure of this pyramid, and that is where we're going to leave it for now.
Oh, alrighty.
Yeah, that is where we're going to leave it for now.
Well, man, alrighty. You got me on the edge of my seat there.
Well, did you have any questions or comments or any feedback about? Or was anything unclear?
No, that was all. That was all very well. Like I got all of that. The only thing that I could I got it. I got everything you were given. The thing that I couldn't help but realize is that Abydos. I'm only assuming that it's spelled ABBADOS, or maybe it's one B and two Ds.
It's ABYDOS.
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 Yeah. Okay. Well, that changes a little bit, but now all I can think about is Arrakis.
Oh, right. Yeah. Yeah. I guess there is a bit of a conflation there.
But I do like it when everything's sort of rhyme in that general way. It's nice. It's nice as a little nudge nudge cough cup kind of thing. I was also expecting the dinner scene to go a little bit differently, because if I was watching that, then my brain immediately went to oh, this is maybe this place was taken over, and now they're going to poison them, or going to knock them all out at this dinner. But then it turns out to just sort of be look at all the weird food we have, that kind of thing.
The plot, one of the saving graces of this, it goes back to what you were saying about how the other science fiction franchise you were discussing was grounded. It sort of unfolds in reasonable ways.
Yeah.
I mean, if you set aside the fact that O'Neill should be in Leavenworth, right? But something is weird going on with the Stargate. They call back the one guy who's been through it.
Yeah.
He can't explain it, and they can't explain it. So he's like, "I'm the one person that has experience with this. Send me back." He goes back. He sees his old friend.
Yeah.
And his old friend says, "I can explain some of this," and that's where we're leaving off. It's a very simple plot.
I like it. I think, this has got a lot of potential. I can see how this went for so long, because this just seemed, especially with that last shot that you described of them walking out of the walking out of this structure. I'm also shocked because one of the other things that I thought of was everybody talks about how in Alien, all of the stupid people in Alien always end up getting infected because they're like, oh yeah, it seems like the air here is breathable. Let me take off my mask so my face is very exposed for these aliens that do things through your face. And so like, one of the first things I thought of whenever they went through was like, okay, it's good that it's in a building, but I wasn't sure if it was going to be into a building or just straight out into the planet, because then it's just like, okay, and they go out, and I really hope they're wearing some kind of pressurized suit, but who knows how a wormhole would deal with that.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up, and so I'll reveal a little bit, if it's okay.
Yeah.
Because they deal with that.
Okay.
Right? Because that's always troubled me, right? It's always troubled me that in science fiction franchises, you go to another planet, everyone's human. What the fuck, right? Like, evolution doesn't work that way in different contexts, right? And everyone can breathe. So I think I've revealed enough to you so far that you can piece together that there's more than one gate.
Oh, yeah.
So there's more than one gate, and the humanoids that use these gates are derivative of humans, so they would need the same kind of biological supports, right? Like breathable air and so forth, right? And they only put these gates on arable planets.
Oh, of course, because that makes sense, because that follows the logical conclusion of, oh, this is a place that is survivable for us, so we should put an easy way for us to travel here.
Yeah, and that is a perfect example of this show is fucking stupid, but the way that they set about the world building makes sense.
Yeah, it does.
Right? And I don't know if I want to admit this publicly, but I have thought about this show a lot, right? And I've thought about how individual plot lines are just inane, right? They're really dumb. But the way that they set up this kind of internal consistency is brilliant in some ways. But I wanted to ask if you feel like you have enough of an understanding of the character of Colonel Jack O'Neill that you are willing to play our game.
I think I am. I think I'm beyond ready.
Okay, all right, very good. You had so just for our listener, the way you set up our game was that I had to choose from one of 3 different characters, and as it happens, I have 3 different characters of Richard Dean Anderson that I think we can choose from. And the first one, obviously, is Colonel Jack O'Neill from Stargate. The second one, obviously, has to be MacGyver. Has to be.
Okay.
Right? I mean, it would be a sin for me not to include Richard Dean Anderson from MacGyver. But he also was in a movie called Firehouse. So you get to choose from this clip that I'm going to play. You have MacGyver, which is in the 80s, and you have Firehouse in 1996, which I think was a made-for-TV movie, totally unrelated. It had Edie Falco in it.
Oh, yeah.
People,
Okay.
right? Yeah. So that's from 1996. And then you also have Stargate, you have MacGyver, and you have this show, Firehouse. So I'm matching you in terms of energy.
Okay.
In that you gave me 3 selections to choose from. Here we go. Mystery quote. I entitled this Mystery Quote.
Yes.
I had him right where I wanted him.
So I'll play that again because it's very short. It's very short.
I had him right where I wanted him.
So I had him right where I wanted him.
Yeah, okay. Well, the only one that I don't have a justification for in mind is Firehouse, because I know nothing about it. My gut, of course, is going to that it might have been some scene with O'Neill talking with either the commander that you were talking about or with Hammond. Could have been one of those guys. They were sort of having a tense thing, and then at the end, he finally, there's some resolution. He goes, I knew I was going to be fine the whole time. So either could be that, but I feel like it might be a little bit closer to MacGyver in that, he always gets himself out of situations with these cockamamie schemes. And that feels a little bit more fitting for him, and the music feels a little bit more fitting for that as well. So I think I'm going to go with MacGyver.
Okay, that's 1 for 0. You have a flawless score so far. You've got it. It was MacGyver.
Alrighty.
I think a lot of these MacGyver quotes are going to be him after a scrape saying, "I was fine. I was fine." Right. So I'm going to have to try to mix it up
He
a
never
little
seems too panicked in that show, does he? He never gets out of something. He goes, "Oh shit, that was awful."
I mean, a lot of this stuff is on YouTube, and you can see. And as dumb as this show is, MacGyver was way dumber.
Oh, I can only imagine.
Dumber. But I will say, and I won't reveal why, but I did some research into MacGyver. I won't reveal why because it's embarrassing, because I was just like, what's he been up to? But I did a little research into MacGyver, and yes, the shows were really dumb, but they were fairly progressive for their time. He refused to carry a gun. He would not kill. And there's a couple of episodes that involve human rights, and I think Richard Dean Anderson himself is a fairly progressive guy.
Cool. I like that for him and for us.
So that's part 1 of Children of the Gods of Stargate SG1, which is a continuation of the film Stargate, the 1994 film. I talked a lot in setting up the plot. It probably was not as entertaining as the just pure incredulity that I display when you're going through the NCIS episodes. But I think if we keep at this, and we don't have to if you don't want to, I completely understand. But if we keep at this, we'll do part 2, because I'm a completionist. We should finish that. But
sure.
Once the show hits its stride, we will be able to enjoy poking holes in it as much as we've enjoyed doing that with NCIS.
Oh, yeah. Oh, man.
It will be very enjoyable. And a few characters show up here and there that would surprise you. Louis Gossett Jr. shows up.
Oh, yeah. Gosh. I have many feelings about Louis Gossett Jr.
Well, he was... I think he's passed away by now, right? I think he's...
If not, I think he's like 95 years old.
Yeah. But what I had heard was that he had said basically to his agent, if you can get me $1 million, I will star in anything. I don't care.
Yeah. Heck yeah.
Yeah. Which I respect that work ethic.
All right. So... what an episode to have gone through all of this so far. I'm excited for the next one we do. I'll go ahead and say for right now, I guess we're just going to put this on the main feed. It'll have different art, it'll have a different title structure. We'll figure that out probably before you hear it, audience. If you want to yell at us via email, you can email us at gibbsittomestraight@gmail.com. If you want to get yelled at by us via occasional microblog, you can follow us on Blue Sky at GITMS.bluesky. I can't remember what the whole Blue Sky thing is. You can find it in our descriptions. Otherwise, I hope you will join us back again, whether we are dissecting NCIS or more Stargate. I had a good time, and I'm ready to see what else this world has to offer us. So thank you very much, Ashley J. Williams.
Thank you, everyone, for listening. We love you all.
Yes, thank you. Bye.
Okay. All right, bye-bye.